¿Quién va a estar conmigo en la sala 2? Yeah. Perfecto. Lucía es la persona having more people right now because it is now, the rooms are now open. So I want to welcome you all. Thank you very much for attending IALIC 2021. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for being here today, sharing with us. Let me see if I can share my screen for a second. Let me see if I can do this because I have so many documents open that you wouldn't believe. Okay, so can you see my screen now? Okay, thank you very much. So today we're going to have 3 presentations. They are very thought-provoking. I was reading the abstracts and I think that we are going to enjoy these presentations. The first presentation is Cristina Abello Contese, research interest in intercultural aspects and study abroad. Maria Dolores Lopez Jimenez, with research interest, intercultural aspects, textbooks, teaching, acquisition. And the title of the presentation is, if you don't go out and talk to people for hours, your Spanish won't improve that much. The struggle to implement learner beliefs through agency while managing anxiety during study abroad, okay? Let me introduce the 3 presentations, okay? And then we can start, thank you. Whose knowledge, Tatiana, welcome back. So here we have Tatiana with research interest, critical intercultural communication, pedagogy, intercultural education, students as partners, students as change agents. Whose knowledge do we validate in universities, addressing challenges for students to be admitted into a community of scholars through a community engaged learning project? And finally, we are having Roshanak Nuralian with research interests in sociolinguistic, cultural adaptation of foreign students in Vienna, a sociolinguistic case study on Iranian students. Okay, so welcome, you're very welcome. Okay, so I think that we can start right now with the first presentation. Let me stop sharing here. Thank you very much. Remember that we have 20 minutes plus 10 minutes questions, okay? So the floor is yours. Maria Dolores, I think that your microphone is off. I think we're not getting you. We cannot hear you. Are you having trouble with the microphones? Give me 1 sec. Necesito ayudita urgente en la sala 2, por favor.
Beatriz, can you hear me now?
Yes. We cannot hear you right now, Maria Dolores. Christian? There is a problem with the microphones.
I think so. Can you hear me though?
Yes, but you have an echo behind you, so I think that maybe you have 2 microphones on. Is it possible to? Yes, I think that there is someone with a second computer open. I only see here Christian and Maria Dolores microphones. So could you please turn maybe one of the microphones off? Thank you.
Okay.
Now I think we're ready. We're not getting you, Maria Dolores.
I think Maria Dolores should turn off the microphone and we
Lucia?
yes, I think Maria Dolores should turn off the microphone and speak with the microphone of Christian.
Okay, are you in the same room? Okay, so why don't you use Christian's microphone and maybe you should turn your own microphone off, Maria Dolores. Thank you very much.
Beatriz, can you hear me right now?
Perfectly, yes.
Okay. Thank you so much.
That's okay. Go ahead.
I was asking you if you can see the PowerPoint that I uploaded.
No, actually, I can see that. Where did you upload it?
Compartir pantalla, that was the option that I tried to get.
Yes,
here.
compartir pantalla, but we don't see it right now.
Let me do it right now. Again.
Okay, go ahead.
PowerPoint. ¿Dónde está para yo compartir? Okay, hold on just a minute. I'm so sorry.
Beatriz, I think the best thing to do might be to transfer the last presenters so that we can deal with our problem.
Okay, perfect. So is that okay if we continue with Tatiana? Is that okay for you?
If that's okay with her, I think that's the best.
Yeah,
Okay,
for me,
that's
not
okay.
a problem.
Anyhow, please do not worry because after this session, okay, so I think that we have a short coffee break. That's what I think. And maybe we can just take 5 more minutes. Go ahead, Tatiana, please. The floor is yours.
Deal with this.
Yeah, I will share my screen then. Okay, so share screen. Okay. Can you see the presentation now?
Yes, we can, Tatiana.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. So welcome everyone. And so my name is Tatiana, and what I'm going to tell you about today is a project that I called Inclusive Education, and it is a pedagogical action that I embedded in a course in intercultural communication that I taught in the fall of 2020. So the setting is the University called Utrecht, which is part of Utrecht University in the Netherlands, and it is an international liberal arts and sciences college. And I had 20 participants from my own courses, so students in the course in intercultural communication. We work together with 10 external students who have a refugee background. And those students are students who are waiting for their status to be legalized and cannot enroll at the university for a full degree program, but through a program that we call inclusion. The university gives them the opportunity to still take courses for free to be active in academic settings and in their education while waiting for the asylum status, for example. And The project was built up through this two pedagogical perspectives, so critical intercultural communication, and on the other side, the students' engagement and student-staff partnership, so working together with students in partnerships. So what we did was, what I did was because of the fact that in the Netherlands, the number of students from international background are increasing every single year. So, for example, this year there was already an increase of 4% compared to 2020, so for a total of 23% of international students over the population of bachelor and master students. So I don't think that we have realized as university the impact those students have on the university, but also how we deal with students in a proper way. So for me, it is important and urgent to understand who is admitted to the academic community, not in terms of diplomas, but in terms of knowledge, in terms of what they can bring to university, who is not. So issues of inclusion and exclusion of students to our university. And also to understand with knowledge and knowledge producing capabilities are recognized and validated. And this applies not only to indigenous knowledge, for example, of non-Western knowledge, but also I would think of students, for example, that are the first to go to university in their families and having the other type of difficulties and challenges when entering the academic world. And also, I think that I believe that it's very important to engage with students' own analysis of their lived experiences with educational inequality, because we all want to aim to work towards more equitable and inclusive practices. So for me, that's where the premise is to start with this project, and especially thinking of what Giroux and Philippe Pacau say, that it's not only about, let's say, developing a narrative of critique, but especially also a narrative of possibility. So this educated hope, because other way you only criticize and you only have critique, but you don't see how to change the world around you for the better. So for me, it's important that we don't only imagine a different future, but we work together in designing concrete solutions to the challenges. And these concrete solutions, in my case, were realized, or we try to realize them through a community-engaged learning project. And what do I mean with that? What do I mean with community-engaged learning? I mean creating this dynamic engagement between the academic course or project and what we call the real world. So what is outside there in terms of challenges and injustices, and how do we at university in an academic setting contribute to address those challenges, but also learning from one another by creating those possibilities for meaningful change, not only for students at university, but for everyone involved. So for me, community engaged learning was one means to foster those educated hope and this discourse of possibility. So the difference between a normal community engaged learning, which is towards the community around and outside of the university, was that my look was on the university as community. So engagement in the own learning community, because that is also a very complex community in itself, a university and academic environment. So what we did, what I created was a project that lasted 6.5 weeks. And for my own students, it was, let's say, part of the course. It was 25% of the total course and the total grade, while for the students that came through inclusion, they gained a certificate of participation. And then we had 9 plenary meetings, of which 3 in hybrid format, while it was still possible, and the rest fully online. And then we started for the first 4 meetings with discussing many theoretical notions, and you will see it in a slide later on, and link those theoretical notions through lived experience and exchanging ideas, exchanging experience together. And then defining the challenges from there, so deriving from both the theory and the lived experiences. And then in meeting 5 to 9, the students were divided up in groups and chose a challenge to work on. And so the inclusion coordinator and myself gave feedback sessions throughout the meetings and throughout the project. And at the end, we concluded that with a dissemination event for the broader community, where students also invited the people they had been working with outside of our project group. So, for example, the class preparation was done online on Padlet. So the readings were assigned and students responded to the readings and students responded to each other's as well. So this was a very important because of the online, of course, setting. So they started to get to know each other, get to know each other experience, exchanging ideas. And so we had the 4 of these Padlets in which students really had a lot of ideas that we use later on. And from there, these were the themes that we worked on in terms of theoretical approaches. So the validation of students' knowledge and student knowledge producing capacity. How do you do that? Why it is important? And also this notion from Singh and Shrestha of double knowing. The fact that international students are situated in the intellectual life of at least 2 societies, and they have this network that we need to tap into and make use of as a community. And also very important for our students and for our projects is the notions of Autar about epistemic worthiness, of unworthiness, and epistemic credibility. And then we worked on this idea of Gibson and Cooksater about politicized compassion. Again, what micro and macro forms of inequality are there, and how do you collectively respond to those in a way that is really compassionate, that helps each other as well. And then from the more practical point of view, in terms of envisioning solution, I use the design thinking, and the design thinking processes were related to developing what Carla Cipolla in Brazil calls a relational service. So a service can be, a counter where you go for information, but that is not relational. You are a customer. While a relational service is about creating a reciprocal willingness to engage with each other and to help each other, even in a more formal setting. So it's about active and collaborative exchange of a service. So this is what we did. And from there, we started harvesting all these ideas online through a discussion board like Miro, where students started creating links and defining their ideas and bringing up even more experiences. And this was, I think, the key moment where indeed I started seeing how to translate theory and experiences into something that could be a challenge that they could work on in a very small amount of time. So from here, these were the 6 themes that students and I developed. So the overwhelming amount of information that incoming students, especially from abroad, receives spread out over different websites, apps, documents, and so on, often in a language that I master only partly. And then the transition from one's own home university, especially for refugee students, to the new university, understanding the academic and especially the social norms in the new institution. And of course, a linguistic challenge, especially the academic writing and academic language, was a problem that was defined. And of course, for international students, what we have heard so much, not being able to interact with other local students because they have their own network of friendships and they disappear after classes, and then the international students are left there with no ways to get to know each other than international students. But also very prominent was the teachers are not always able to create this inclusive classroom and safe environments according to most students, and also how to enable student voice. Students could indicate their top 3 topic, and then I created groups trying to balance the students with refugee background with my own students, and then taking their preference into account. So from there, we went into design thinking. Design thinking is for me a very practical, very hopeful way of working with students, because it is really about inventing possible futures and creating something that is tangible. Even as idea, the idea is to create something that is tangible and to propose practical innovation, being open-minded and not be limited in the design phase on things that are already there, but really envisioning new things. And so these are 5 phases that are very, very important. So especially the empathize phase. So when you really learn about the persons that have the challenge, what are they experiencing, what are they feeling, why is this a challenge? And then from there, you start defining what the challenge is, ideate a possible solution, prototype it, so creating something that is visible for the group you are working with to give you feedback, and then test it. So for us, the empathize phase was a new phase, and it was the phase that students kind of focused the most and learned a lot about, because it's really about this human-centered design process, so really observing, engaging with people. And in this case, they were also people. They were also the group, the target group. So it was in between observing and engaging themselves and immersing in their own challenges and their own feelings, but also going out and talking to other students, talking to staff, talking to teachers. And so this is a phase where you really collect all the possible ideas and all the possible challenges, and then you start forming understanding, a group understanding of what the challenge is. And only from there you can start designing a solution. So these were the 4 main assignments that the student had. So when they had the empathize mode here, so when they interviewed people and defined the challenge, they did with what we call the point of view. So what did you notice? What was there? And why is this meaningful to people? And what could be changed to improve situation? From there, they worked on what we call the options paper. What are 2 or 3 different options that you could think of to address a challenge? And this is really the brainstorm phase, really creative, trying out odd things. And only then you start defining which could be done, which could be useful, and how to do that. And then you start designing the prototype. So the prototype can just be a picture, can be a drawing, can be an object that you can create. And of course, in our case, because of COVID, almost nothing was really practical in terms of objects, but they had to work around it with images and diagrams and so. But the idea is that you go back to your users or to your community and say, okay, this is what we do, try it out, give us feedback. So really, these are very important. The prototype needs to be concrete enough for people to see and experience what the possible solution could be and how using this solution could help address the challenge. And indeed, then the test mode, so getting feedback was important. And from there, then the students needed to create a story. Why this change, this option could really be beneficial for us as group and for other students as well. And so with this in mind, students worked on deliverables, on output that they could present. And I'm going to show you their own one slide that they created to show what their challenge was and what they created. So the first group worked, as you remember, on the overwhelming amount of information that they had. And they decided to design an addition to an append of the UU of our universities that was already used. And they really designed with an app designer, interface, and also the content. They asked people what would be there. They tried it out, of course, on paper, but they tried to cater for different groups and have different tools for different groups so that everyone would just find what they needed in a very quick way. So indeed, they wrote, no more confusing students looking through the site or asking friends trying to find the right information. So their application of their solution was a very practical tool that could easily be implemented in the app. The second challenge was how to make international students feel like home. And they wanted really to create a dialogue between professors and international students about academic norms. So they designed a handout with questions and with activities that students and teachers could do together. And especially in first class, and really about academic norms, making those norms visible and not hidden, so that students could decide also to bring in their own norms and values and have this discussion. The third group was about about mastering the new academic language. And they wanted to expand the buddy program that the university has, more on a social level, and they called it academic buddyship. They're really working on improving academic writing, learning what it means to write an essay in comparison to writing a paper or writing a research paper. What are the assumptions that teachers have about indeed what students would be able to do when this is not explicit. And they say that by having a buddy to help you, students will become more confident, skilled, and adaptable in their academic writing. Fourth group had the social challenge, so social interaction. And this, in first instance, seemed a very essentializing solution, a culture day. They created the idea of a full culture day where students would use their artistic, so music, art, dance abilities to connect and also to portray their layered identity. They really wanted to avoid the essentializing type of, because this is a Chinese table, this is an Italian table, but really trying to connect on a personal level and show how complex their identities are by showing who they are in real life. Not only I am part of this cult, but this is me. So this was what their idea of indeed showing different cultures within a culture day. And then the final one.
To interrupt you, we have 2 more minutes, okay?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank
But
you.
the final one was indeed the creating a teacher training. And you can see here in session 1, the handout that they wanted to create. So having teachers create our own first class training session to tackle indeed issues of relationship and how to create inclusivity. So working at the level of with the staff and not directly with students. And from there, then student and teacher together will develop this further. And also a learning difference center. So the final 2 slides are about how students reflected on this. I only took 2 themes now because there are too many. There are some reflection on inclusive education, how they learned what it is inclusive education. And I think the second one is interesting, that a student learned that inclusive education does not necessarily only apply to international students, but at the point of inclusive education is to include everyone. So this person didn't know that also that students in their own home country felt sometimes excluded. And this was a big eye opener, but also that indeed teachers and students should work together. Students should not just adhere and change themselves, but they need to have this conversation where they create together this optimal workspace for both. And then the final slide is indeed the students reflecting on this idea of creating possibilities. And what is important here, I think, is that they realize how possible it is in such a small amount of time through cooperation with students to learning with each other and being with each other, how much you can achieve. So indeed, achieving something so big and relevant to our classroom with a small group of students. So I think for me, these were the 2 main takes, together, of course, with very many individual skills and benefits that they had that they can use for later on. So here is my bibliography. If you want to contact me, feel free. And thank you very much for listening. And I would like to hear your questions, of course.
Thank you, Tatiana. Thank you. It's been such an interesting presentation. Thank you very much. I apologize in advance because I have my own background noise in the building. They are hammering so strong, so I am sorry about that. Thank you, Tatiana. You know, it's always good to hear about critical pedagogy and how the creative component of your project is so great. I have so many questions myself, but of course I am going to open the floor for questions first. I really enjoyed the concept of politicized compassion. Isn't that an important concept within your own research? Wow. And I also was, you know, amazed of the creative part and how students have been empowered to do creative things, to be the main characters of the whole story. So awesome. Do we have questions for Tatiana, please? Could you please raise your hand if you have any questions for Tatiana? I think that we have the time for a couple of questions. Okay, so I will start with my own question. You know, when you mentioned the idea of community engaged learning, I was, and the real word, I was wondering if you were referring to the political education we were talking yesterday in different lectures, if you have a reference to that.
Yeah, I think that there were two things, because of course when the university, at least my university, is now focusing so much on the relation of university to community outside, how important it is that the university is not in the ivory tower, but means something for the community. And indeed, here there is this idea, of course, of helping for the good. So there is a lot of focus now in our university, but also in the Netherlands, to do that. And what I think I missed was indeed the real look inwards. So indeed, this political look inward, indeed, if I listen to what Claire Cramscher said yesterday, was indeed about, you know, how much can you, let's say, criticize or be, let's say, political about your own institution as a teacher, but also as a student, and especially also the issue of, if you're a student, how politicized can you be in a classroom or in a project like this when you also have a grade at the end of an evaluation. So we know that. I think that it is important to still show students that they have the agency, and I think indeed that probably in the presentation of Dolores, Maria Dolores and Christian, there will be this issue of agency, the agency to do that. And it's very important that I give them the tools to do that, or not even the tools, but that they are allowed to use any tool that they have already, maybe, or develop new ones.
I find that so interesting, so great. Thank you very much, Tatiana. Do we have another question, maybe?
Yeah.
I just, you know, we have 30 seconds because I see that we don't have any other questions here in the chat, but maybe 30 seconds just to broaden a little bit the idea of politicized compassion. Yeah. That would be my, just 30 minutes for that.
Yeah, for me, it's indeed the idea of also what we were talking yesterday about this abstract idea of peoplehood and how you connect to others through humanities. Sometimes I think that students can see that as very, abstract. We are all humans. How do you go about indeed changing things when there are so many different ideas and opinions pulling apart, and this idea of working together and trying to find ways in which you foster this dialogue. And it's not about the safe space we talk to students, but it's about the brave space where you still are having the difficult conversation, where you are also having this difficult emotions, not shying away from that, but from there, see how to move forward in developing new ideas. That is for me.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. We're very grateful you were here today sharing your project with us. Thank you very much. Okay, so Maria Dolores and Christian, do you think you're ready now to continue? The floor is yours. Christian?
Beatriz, we are going to use one computer. So this is Maria Dolores, and then the second part is going to be given by Christian, okay?
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. We are going to share our PowerPoint in, I think we are going to, okay, because we tried to upload the PowerPoint before, but since it was, since Tatiana was given her presentation, we couldn't, okay? So we'll try to upload our PowerPoint. If it is not working for whatever reason, just let me know, okay?
Perfect.
¿Dónde está el desktop? Debería salir a mí me sale. ¿Dónde está la...
Maybe if you're having some trouble, Maria Dolores and Christian, maybe you can send the PowerPoint through the chat and one of us can show them for you.
Sure, yeah, I think it's going to be easier. Okay, thanks a lot. Okay.
We get it now. I think that now you're sharing your screen.
Right, let's see. Is that fine? Can you get it?
Yes, perfect. We can see that perfectly.
Okay, thanks a lot. But then we have this here that doesn't allow us to, okay, cultural participantes. How can we put this? Okay, right here. Otherwise we can't. Okay, I think we are ready to start.
Perfect.
Can you? Okay. The title of our presentation is, if you don't go out and talk to people for hours, your Spanish won't improve that much. The struggle to implement learner beliefs through agency while managing anxiety during study abroad. Cristiana Bello Contese, University of Seville, Spain. Maria Dolores López Jiménez, Pablo de la Vida, University, Seville, Spain. Within second language acquisition, there is a fast-growing area known as individual differences among L2 learners. There are three socio-affective individual differences that are going to be the focus of our study, which are agency, anxiety, and learner beliefs. Some selected definitions are going to provide it in what follows. Individual differences, according to Tabacoli, can be defined as the differences in how learners learn and L2, how fast they learn, how successful they are. These differences include language aptitude, learning styles, learning strategies, personality, motivation, anxiety, willingness to communicate, and learner beliefs. It has to be clarified that there is typically a wide range of inter-individual variation among L2 learners in terms of how fast, that is, rate of acquisition, how well, that is, ultimate level of attainment or success of acquisition, they acquire an additional language. Both the process of L2 acquisition and its final product reflect such horizontal and vertical variation. Thus, much research has been done in second language acquisition, especially in the area of individual differences, to find out the complex relationships between a given ID, that is age, gender, identity, socioeconomic background, or learner agency, and its varying potential for rate and or ultimate attainment, either in the form of a present explanation or a future prediction. The first individual difference that we are going to introduce, define, is learner agency that can be manifested as action or non-action. According to Duff, agency refers to people's ability to make choices, take control, self-regulate, and thereby pursue their goals as individuals, leading potentially to personal or social transformation. Conon claims that learners may feel that they want and are able to act, that is, sense of agency, and then proceed to real action and participation, that is, exercise of agency. At the same time, their refusal to act or participate in a specific context or for specific situation reasons is also an indication of their sense and exercise of agency. The second individual variation is anxiety. According to Arnold and Brown, is associated with negative feelings such as uneasiness, frustration, self-doubt, apprehension, and tension. Dobney, DeWall, and Conon claim that language anxiety may be conceptualized as a trait or a situation-specific anxiety, that is, an emotion which is either stable across both time and context or specific to one domain only. And a learner experience both trait and state anxiety. Therefore, trait anxiety can be defined as a person's general level of anxiety, whereas situation anxiety refers to a specific anxiety, the kind of anxiety that you may feel in a specific situation. Gregerson and McIntyre point out that language anxiety reflects the worry and negative emotional reaction aroused when learning and using a second language. The third individual difference that we are going to put an emphasis on is learner beliefs. Tabacoli referred to learner beliefs as ideas learners have concerning different aspects of language learning, and language teaching that may influence their attitudes and motivations in learning and have an effect on their language strategies and learning outcomes. Richard Schmidt point out that learners' belief systems are relatively stable sets of ideas and attitudes about such things as how to learn language, effective teaching strategies, appropriate classroom behavior, their own abilities, and their goals in language learning. It has to be clarified that there are several ideas that have been studied empirically in second language acquisition within the study abroad context, although often based on one single idea rather than on several ideas in an interrelated view. While beliefs have been treated in many studies, anxiety has been widely researched, yet mainly within an instructed context, and both factors have been largely based on English language learners. Instead, in contrast, far fewer studies have centered on agency in study abroad. The aims of the study broadly aimed to explore what a promising year-long American sojourner would do regarding her target language involvement and intercultural engagement in order to increase her proficiency levels in the L2 and the target culture. Two of her self-reported goals while studying in Spain. It has to be clarified also that the C2 here includes academic aspects as practiced in the host community. The roles of the participants, agency, trait and or situation, anxiety, and learner beliefs became increasingly salient given the study and gradually evolved into its shared focus. From a methodological point of view, this is a longitudinal ethnographically oriented case study that was conducted for 9 months. Data collection came from or consisted of one extensive background questionnaire, 6 semi-structured face-to-face interviews conducted in the L2, 1 hour each. This recorded data provide informal, interactive samples of relevant topics. 3 L2-based, 3 C2-based tasks were performed during the interviews, and 5 journal entries, 500 words, more or less 500 words long in the L2. This provided formal, retrospective samples of recent intercultural cultural experiences in writing. The participant, Ella, was a 21-year-old female, US American nationality. She was a third-year student at a private university. She was majored in Spanish, and she was also pursuing a minor in French. But her family background was as follows: German American father, Italian American mother, 2 sisters, 1 brother, and she was middle class. Her Italian American side in this case was dominant.
Okay, let's move on and continue with the participant. At the start of her sojourn, the participant had spent 8 years learning Spanish in classroom settings. She had spent 1 week visiting a Spanish-speaking country in Latin America. She showed favorable attitude towards her L2 and C2, had an above average academic record, and she had a strong family identity as both a daughter and a sister. At the start of her sojourn, the participant's overall proficiency level in L2 Spanish was upper intermediate. Her spontaneous speech was not fluent, accurate, or complex. Self-reported long-term goals were improve her Spanish proficiency, become friends with Spanish young people, and improve her sociocultural knowledge of Spain. At the end of the first semester, the participant had obtained above average grades in all her content-based classes. 4 out of 5 of them had been taken at a US-style private college affiliated with the local university, the local public university. She had stayed with a local family, that is a homestay option, and she had gone through a non-immersive or bilingual experience where Spanish had been intensified, but English was still used every day. Before the second semester started, she had expressed a future commitment to using her L2 more actively with native speakers during the coming semester. She had experienced considerable variation in her spoken use of Spanish, that is, ups and downs, partly due to the steady presence of English, while the local accent was still difficult for her to understand, especially in informal interaction. She thought her content-based classes taught in Spanish, along with out-of-class exposure, had been helpful to improve her listening skills, and she had experienced minor identity upsetting episodes in sporadic conversations with native speakers. From winter break between December and January until the end of the second semester in June, Ella increased her levels of L2 involvement and C2 engagement. Interacting with native speakers, she became mainly interested in interactional rather than simply transactional talk. As part of her agency, she actively sought interaction with native speakers her age, in spite of experiencing a status unequal position in the C2. Active attitudes and interviews. She typically asked for L2 assistance and L2 and C2 clarification, mainly concerning vocabulary items and cultural concepts she did not understand or remember. Verbalizing her beliefs. She expressed solid, judicious beliefs about L2 learning and using. Although she did so spontaneously, many of her principles seem to be the result of serious and very careful reflection. Local cultural activities. She reported observing and participating in local cultural activities, for example, during public celebrations at Easter. Living arrangements. She rented a shared apartment with a Spanish student and another American sojourner, experiencing the school system in the host culture. All 5 classes she took were taught at the local public university. Thus, she experienced very different teaching and testing styles from those in the US. She had classmates from Spain, the US, and other European countries. She passed oral classes with above average grades. Time at host culture. Compared with other sojourners in her program, she spent more time at home at her destination versus traveling within and outside Spain, an activity which is very popular among sojourners. Late return. Due to the length of the second semester at the local university she attended, she returned to the United States in mid-June, that is 5 weeks later than the great majority of the other sojourners in her program. The discussion from the point of view of individual differences, which are the center of attention of our study, from the point of view of agency, her agency triggered a noticeable fight or proactive response based mainly on finding and keeping native conversation partners her age. Access to simple social activities and availability of partners for sustained interaction were not natural occurrences, as is often assumed regarding second language contexts. Such agentic actions were actually part of an effortful process for Ella. In spite of facing a status and equal position as a sojourner in the C2, her agency led her to intentional, although discontinuous, L2 action and C2 participation. From the point of view of anxiety, a weaker self-image increased her anxiety levels. Ella often described her experiences and feelings in the host culture as frustrating. However, during the interviews, she typically dealt with her trait and L2-based anxieties as a matter of course, rather than as impediments. A key frustration was based on feeling a reduced sense of self and social status when interacting with native speakers. This deteriorated her self-image. Yet, she fully acknowledged the need to do so in order to improve her fluency. Finally, from the point of view of learner beliefs, she showed solid, judicious learner principles, as we pointed out earlier, rather than just beliefs, many of which seem to be the result of serious and careful reflection on her part. For example, she believed that interaction with native speakers was essential to improve her spoken Spanish. At one point in an interview, she said, if you don't go out and talk to people for hours, your Spanish won't improve that much. She also believed that improving her spoken Spanish was a personal and extremely intentional process. This is exactly the way she expressed that belief. Conclusion. Ella's promising study abroad situation at the outset gradually translated into relatively sustained L2 and C2 involvement in the target community, especially during the second semester. The availability of partners for sustained interaction was not the result of spontaneous situations in this context. Ella made a conscious effort, agentic action, for such situations to be a part of her experience here. In sum, the effects of these highly perceptive and critical learner beliefs increased her anxiety levels, while her powerful learner agency was weakened, not only as a result of the combined effects of her beliefs and anxiety, but also due to her reduced self-image and status unequal position in the host culture. Our concluding reflection is as follows. From the point of L2 oral proficiency assessment, we can say that informal assessment of Ella's interactive L2 proficiency was performed by the researchers through selected segments of the interactive data, in other words, the recorded interviews and tasks, and the result was that substantial improvement in L2 fluency was found, rather less improvement in terms of L2 complexity, and only minimal improvement in terms of L2 accuracy. This proficiency-based finding raises the additional question, a question that was not analyzed in our study, however, that is L2 learning aptitude profile might have been weak rather than average. The option of choosing between a short and a long-term study abroad program has become rather controversial in the US and elsewhere, with the great majority of American sojourners opting for the former in programs typically from 6 to 8 weeks in terms of length. Taking into account that E was an anxious person, a short-term program would have appeared more advisable for her. However, what about other relevant IDs such as aptitude for L2 learning? While completing tasks, Ella's aptitude profile for L2 learning, as we mentioned, seemed to be low. In other words, in her case, more time was needed. Thus, a short-term study abroad program would not have helped her improve her L2 as compared with non-anxious and average aptitude sojourners. That is all. Thank you very much for your attention, and our apologies for the technical problems at the beginning.
Thank you very much, Dolores and Christian, for such thought-provoking presentation. You know, it's always so good to hear a little bit more about my native language and what's been doing in research. Congratulations, thank you. It's been very interesting. You know, it caught my attention the fact that you're taking again the concept of language anxiety. And I think that this is important because sometimes you think that language anxiety it comes like from an old long tradition, Krashen's tradition or something like that. And, you know, it is not very frequent to see the relevancy of language anxiety today. So I really enjoyed hearing more about your research. Do we have questions for Maria Dolores and Christian right now? We have time for a couple of questions. Tatiana, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Maria Dolores and Christian. As a language teacher, I recognize your conclusions. I think that one of the things that for me is interesting is that I would like to ask you if you were able to talk to Ella about that. So how did she reflect on her own goals? Did she feel that she met her own goals? That's the first one, and or not? But also the other one, because you were talking about anxiety and about the sometimes the difficult situation she faced and the frustration. So the affective elements are very, very important. You know if she prepared for that when she was home. So we know that the preparation in terms of also not the positive things that you want to do, but also challenges like cultural adaptation, if not cultural shock, is an important part. Do you have an idea if she did that and if that would have helped her? Because the frustration is always there. I had the same when I went on exchange here in the Netherlands myself, so I know what it is, but I wasn't prepared at all to what exchange meant. So thank you.
Yeah, I think the first question that you gave us was about her self-reflection.
Go ahead, we can hear you.
Okay. Is that yeah, she I'm not sure if I heard your question, the first one. I mean, I don't know if what you exactly wanted to know about her self-report goals. I can't hear you, Tatiana. Can you?
Yeah, so it's indeed that she had, you listed all the goals that she had for coming on exchange, but did she feel that she met those goals or not at all, or all in part?
Well, I think she was quite honest in the sense that she partly met her goals, but she was quite honest. She was not giving, she was not, at the end, she was not stating that she fully, completely her goals, but she was kind of in between, or she was not 100%, or she did not achieve her goals 100%. Okay. And then the second question was if she was really, she got some kind of preparation before coming to civil.
In terms of preparation, there is typically, although we have just presented Ila's situation, there were some other participants also in our study, and there is typically quite a different level of preparation depending on the specific program. With some programs, there is some preparation. With other programs, there is absolutely no preparation at all. And when that happens, I think this is the case with this particular participant. There was very little preparation, institutional preparation, right? Therefore, in those situations, in this particular situation, and also in other situations in which this happens, it is basically their own initiative what counts. In other words, the background information that they may get on their own, et cetera, et cetera. But this is normally facts. Facts. They don't get information related to other parts of the cultural aspects that they may be facing in a short time, such as the local practices, et cetera, or such as the fact that the Spanish spoken in southern Spain differs considerably from the Spanish spoken in northern Spain, for example. So this is just one example of something that would be quite relevant, right? As in her case, for instance, she continued telling us, right, how difficult it was for her to understand the local accent. And that was basically because she had not been prepared in that particular respect, and she didn't even know it was going to be different, right? So those things do not seem to be extremely relevant, but they are very important, you know. Pre-study abroad preparation is actually very important, much more than it may seem to be.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear indeed how she felt frustrated, which is so bad when, of course, when within 1 year is normal that you have frustration moment, but it's very difficult to deal with that if you are not prepared.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Maria Dolores, and thank you, Christian, for such thought-provoking presentation. I am sure we want to hear more about it in the future if you decide to continue exploring, you know, the same type of arena and the same type of research. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you,
Okay,
Beatriz, and thank you for your patience also.
No, it's okay. We enjoyed it. You know, we're okay. It's been so great to hear more about Spanish in the conference. So thank you again for that too. Okay, so now we can continue with Roshanak Nuralian, who's our next presenter. Roshanak, are you here with us? Roshanak, are you able to join us? Could you please open your microphone and camera? Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
So you're very welcome today.
Thank you very much. And I'm trying to share my screen.
That's okay. Go ahead.
No, I think Christian is still sharing his. That's why she cannot do that.
Yes, I cannot do it.
Christian, could you please? Thank you. Could you
Beatriz, can you tell us how to, okay, what can we do just to get rid of our PowerPoint presentation so the next presenter can upload hers? What should we do?
There should be an option saying stop sharing.
Yes, you should have stop sharing presentation.
Okay, let me try this. Compartir pantalla. Deja de.
Perfect. Now, okay, Roshana.
Yes, thank you. No. So, do you see my screen?
It is loading right now. So we just need to wait for a second.
Okay.
Now we can see your presentation.
Okay, good. My name is Roshana Nouralian, and I'm from University of Vienna, Applied Linguistic Department, and my thesis is about cultural adaptation of foreign students in Vienna. That's a social linguistic case study on Iranian students at different universities in Vienna. Okay. As a consequence of globalization, many people migrate to other countries to meet their educational goals. But as you know, international students experience significant psychological and social cultural changes and also challenges. In order to reduce cultural pressure in foreign contexts, the foreign students must adapt to new social cultural environment. Adaptation is more difficult when there is low proximity between home culture and house culture or ethnicity. Ward defines cultural learning as a process of acquiring cultural knowledge and skills by migrants in order to survive them in a new society. So following the cultural and linguistic differences between Iran and Austria, Iranian students may experience difficulties such as language barriers, hardship in adaptation to new social cultural environment, and also acculturation in Austrian social cultural environment. They may also experience some difficulties in Austrian academic system due to the differences between the academic system in Iran and Austria. In this regard, I decided to do this research to find out at the first step, to find out the main difficulties and problems that Iranian students may face in their student life in Austria. And in the next step, I'm going to focus on the different ethnic backgrounds and mother tongues of the Iranian students, because Iran is a very large country and there are many different ethnic backgrounds and mother tongues in Iran. Therefore, the Iranian students who study at universities in Vienna are from different ethnicities and mother tongues in Iran. And it was very interesting for me to find out if these different ethnic backgrounds and mother tongues have any influence in their acculturation and cultural adaptation in Austrian social cultural environment or not. In this study, culture will be considered based on the holidays definition of culture, as both considering both large culture and small culture. Large culture is the traditional culture, and the small culture is the behavior, specific behavior of the specific groups. Cultural adaptation is a process that the migrant should pass to adapt to the new social cultural environment. through their migration process. And Kim, in her model, introduces 6 different categories that makes it easier to distinguish if cultural adaptation has been successful or not. And also, according to various acculturation strategy, migrants can be divided into 4 different groups, depending on the amount and the extent that they acquire the new culture in the host society, or the amount and extent that they remain their ethnic background and ethnic culture. So the migrants can be divided in 4 different groups as integration, assimilation, separation, and marginalization. So to answer the questions of this study, I'm applying a mixed method approach, and I've started it with the qualitative phase by doing some focus group discussions. I had 3 Persian focus group discussions with Iranian students from different universities in Iran, and also it was very important for me to choose the participants who are from different ethnic backgrounds and different mother tongues in Iran. And it was not really easy because of the small Iranian society in Vienna, and it was very difficult process. And then I continued the qualitative phase with individual interviews with 22 Iranian students, again from different ethnic backgrounds and mother tongues, and from different universities in Vienna. And I asked them to write short essay writing about 2 topics. And in the next phase, I'm going to continue the research with quantitative phase, applying survey. And here you can see that why I have applied qualitative, and I'm going to continue the quantitative approach. I have applied qualitative approach to explore the problems, to find out what's the problems, and I could find answers to the main points in the interviews. And as I mentioned before, I applied focus group discussion, interview, short essay writing, and I applied max QDA, XMARD aptitude for transcription. And at the end, I'm going to visualize a model applying max QDA. And then I will continue in the quantitative phase to applying the questionnaires, and the questions will be designed based on the basic codes that I have achieved in my interviews. So this way, qualitative and quantitative parts will be combined and joined to each other. And so then I should test the reliability and validity of the questions, and applying SPSS as the key software, and depending on the type of the model that will be designed, I should apply AMOS or PLS as SEM, structural modeling. Therefore, can we say that there is a pragmatism paradigm in this study, because I'm applying mixed method approach based on adaptive reasoning, the interaction between qualitative and quantitative approach. And here you can see the process of coding, because at the first I started with the primary coding, and at the level of primary coding, after each interview, I wrote some comments for myself as the memo, as the main points of each interview, and I started to translate and transcribe them. And then I wrote the basic codes and then the similar codes and the codes that had correlation join to each other in some categories, and then different categories goes under one main concept as the axial coding. And now I'm going to point out some main difficulties and issues to coding. I can say the main problem of the students as the interviewees and participants of the focus group discussion and the expert view interviewees have mentioned is the German language, because German language is totally far away from Persian language. And most of the students, Iranian students, have no background about the German language, because the second language in the Iranian school is English. And the other problem is the age of the Iranian students in Vienna, because that's a complex situation. And in fact, due to the political and social situation in Iran, many adults decide to migrate to different European countries, and they found that the student visa is the most easier way as a key for the migration. And therefore, it's the reason that most of the Iranian students in Austria are in adult age, and it's not for adults to start to learn a difficult language like German. But the other important point is that according to the language policy of Austria, German language plays a very important role in different social activities in this country. Therefore, the person who wants to live in Austria and who works or study should know German language. However, in some universities, depending on the disciplines of the universities, some universities or some faculties are based on English language. But here you can see an example of participant 3 in Persian Focus Group 2, that he exactly mentions that I interacted more with the German speaker friends, and it helped me to be familiar more with the words in German. And he exactly points out that the interaction within the Austrian society and the friendship with the German language speakers had played very important role for improving his German language. Because another problem is that maybe I will mention, point out in the next slide, is the problem of the German Language Institute in Austria. Because according to the academic system of Austrian society, it's possible to accept foreign students and issue the admission for the foreign students, and the foreign students have the opportunity to study German language in Austria through 2 years. And through 2 years, they should get the C1 certificate. But the problem is that most of the participants and interviewees were not satisfied with the education and language teaching system in Austria, and they were completely unsatisfied because they say that we pay a lot of money, and the language institutes tuition fees are very expensive, but the quality is not good. And therefore, when we go to the university and we attend the courses, university courses, or when we want to employ for work, we cannot speak German well, and that's the main problem. And the other an important code is academic category, academic culture, because as I mentioned at the beginning, in this study, smart culture play important role, and academic culture can be considered as one of the main factors of a smart culture. And the result of the interviews and the focus group discussions shows that the students at different universities and even at different institutes under one faculty have completely different experiences about both language policy in the institutes and universities, and also about the acceptance of the Austrians. And some of them had very interesting experiences about experiences completely different acceptance at two different institutes under one faculty. And here, oh, and so, and the other problem is the student visa. Because according to the academic policy of Austria, as I mentioned before, they observed foreign students to this country with special principles as the student visa. And this student visa make many restrictions from different aspects for these students. For example, they have a real problem to find a job, and the interviews shows that most of them are under the heavy pressure, psychological pressure, because of the financial problem in this country. However, it has two different reasons. The first reason is the financial problem in the country, in Iran, because of the political situation of Iran and sanction, and decreasing the value of the currency of Iran through previous years. And on the other hand, they are not allowed to work here easily. And the other important issue is the language and the influence of the language policy of this country, because as I mentioned before, upon the language policy of Austria, it's very important to know the German language. And because they are not very professional in German language, they have problem to find a job because of the lack of knowledge in German language, and on the other hand, because of the restriction due to the student visa. However, I have not completed the coding and analyzing all the interviews and the focus group discussions because I have a huge amount of data. But till now, I could do about half of the analysis, and upon the result that I achieved now, I could find some similarities between the model of Kim and the data that I have achieved, the result that I have achieved. For example, you can see the main codes and categories that I have found. I have written below the model, and I could find the exact relation between some categories of Kim and the result that I have achieved. But the main point is that in my study, a small culture, as I mentioned briefly, due to the different atmosphere and the different principles and culture at different universities and institutes, play important point that I have written in red color. And you can see that a small culture can be seen at different categories. And maybe it can make some changes in this model. I'm not sure, and I'm very interested to find out what will be the result, final result, because I'm trying to visualize the model when I finish the coding, and it's very interesting to find out how will be the new model, modified model. So as a conclusion, I can say that two important factors can be considered as the main problems. However, there are different categories as a result, but the main categories are German language proficiency, as I mentioned before, due to the language policy of Austria, and also Austrian academic system, and the low acceptance by Austrians. That all these issues affect on the cultural adaptation of the Iranian students in Austria. And the other important issue is financial problem that I mentioned before, as a result of political and financial crisis in Iran, and also the academic policy and student visa in Austria. And also the Austrian policy to absorb foreign students, and Austrian migration policy that makes some sense of, leads to make some sense of discrimination against the foreign students in Austria. So as the next step, I'm going to complete the qualitative data analysis, and I will try to design the questionnaire based on the basic codings in my qualitative part, and then design the hypothesis based on the model and the overlapping between the axial coding, and then I will test the hypothesis. Thanks a lot for your attention.
Thank you a lot, Roshanak, because I think you have been working very hard on your project. You have lots of data, I can see that. It's always good to hear about cultural adaptation. I think it's a very sensitive topic. Now, for example, in Colombia, we're having the experience. It is not the same experience, but here we're having the experience of having massive migration from Venezuelans. And even when we speak the same language, still you can see the need for cultural adaptation from schools, from primary schools, from nursery schools up to higher education. So I can imagine the complexity of having another language like German. And also, some in the policies, the Austrian policies of migration you have been mentioning. I think it's very interesting, and I hope the best for you to continue with your research.
Thank you very much.
So do we have questions for Roshanak? I think we have the time for 1 or 2 questions, maybe. Tatiana, please.
Hi, Roshanka, thank you very much. I recognize a lot of what I've also presented from my students with a refugee background in those challenges that we defined. One of the things that is not at all in the data, so the students probably didn't talk about it a lot, the role of the teachers and the staff in university to ease the transition, because indeed there are the issues of the academic language, academic norms, and so there is nothing about, not much about the teachers. So I was curious, did they mention any role, because they talk about other students?
In fact, they were not very, they had not a very problem about the professors and the teachers. But the main point, because I have a large amount of data and I had not enough time to mention all different aspects of the problems. But the main point about the professors is that, in Austria, there is another problem about different dialects. Because when the students attend to the language institute, they learn Hochdeutsch or Standard German. And it's completely different from Vienna accent. And it's not only Vienna accent, because here there are many different dialects and they're completely different. And when they study at the language institutes, they learn standard German. But when they enter in the society, they hear different dialects and they cannot understand what they say. That's the main problem. And also, some of them have mentioned the same problem at the academic context, because they mentioned some of the professors don't care about the foreign students and they speak in their own dialect. And it's very difficult for the foreign students who have even problem with the German standard. That's the main problem, but they had not many difficulties regarding the professors.
Interesting, interesting. I'm afraid we don't have time for more questions. However, I have written in the chat the different emails, Roshana's email, Tatiana's, and Maria Dolores and Christian emails, so that you can maybe send some of your questions or just continue the interaction. If you have any suggestions for Roshana, I'm sure she's very happy to get them for her research. So very good luck, Roshana.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you, Tatiana, again. Thank you, Maria Dolores and Christian and Roshana again. We have 2-hour break, okay? In Colombia, it's lunchtime. We are just close to lunchtime, and we are going to have 2-hour break before the last session that is going to be in the main room in a couple of hours. So thank you very much for this thought-provoking, interesting conversation, and see you later for Manuela Guilherme's keynote speaker, okay? Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye, have a great time. See you later. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you. Bye.